Training they have to put in on these guys. Right? it's not going to be conducive.
All right. Well, let's get this show on the road. Mr. Gomez.
First, the old business.
All right. It is February. April 21st.
Yeah, man, we're rewinding time.
So, April 21st. This day in history. 1915, Anthony Quinn was born. You remember him?
Yes.
Of course. He was Zeus in several Hercules movies.
Oh, yeah.
He was in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a lot of stuff. 1924, Larry Forrester. He was the writer for most of Star Trek Next Generation. Makes me think of The Big Lebowski when he shows up and he's like, he wrote the bulk of the series, so not a lightweight by any stretch.
Yeah, he's in the Iron Lung. Yeah. Big fan of your work, sir.
All right. 1935. I've got a story about this guy, but we'll go. Charles Grodin. Mm-hmm. You know Charles Grodin. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Charles Grodin, who appeared in such films as The Incredible Shrinking Woman and 1976's King Kong, and he was in Rosemary's Baby. Charles Grodin is a man who I despise, although I'm sure he's a phenomenal human being. But that motherfucker was a bad guy in the Great Muppet Caper. He was the bad guy in the Muppet movie.
I loved him in Midnight Run.
And so, because he's such he's a bad guy in a Muppet movie, and I was like 5 whenever I saw it. I'm like, fuck that guy.
It reminds me of something James Earl Jones that said he took his kids, he took one of his daughters to go see Empire Strikes Back in the theater. She was just old enough that he felt it was okay for her to go watch it. And then when they're leaving, she looked really sad, and he tried to hold her hand. She wouldn't hold his hand. He said, "Baby, what's wrong?" He says, "You cut your son's hand off." I said, "Sweetheart, that's a movie. I would, that's not real. I just did the voice." You did that boy bad. You didn't visit him or see him. Said she was quiet to him for a week after Empire Strikes Back.
All right, let's see here. 1974, Jennifer Blancpain. She's the wife of Michael Bain.
Okay.
And she was in Dark Angel, Absent, The Divide, The Victim, Jacob, Among Friends, Malignant, and The Night Visitor.
She's really sweet, by the way. I've met her a couple times.
I've never met her.
She's really nice.
And that is it for the old business. So we're going to take a break. Come back with the new.
In the dark of the night, something strange is going on.
You see that movie, Night of the Living Dead? Sure. They ship those bodies. Well, say hello.
The dead have risen from the grave.
Mister, there's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100?
And now the question is, how do we get them back into the ground?
Bert, Frank, we have a little problem.
4 left, 10 right.
It's all over everything! Stupid asshole! Watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job! Like this job!
Brain.
Medical science is baffled.
And it's a puzzle, because technically, you're not alive.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
How do you kill something that's already dead?
Well, how do I know, Fred? I don't know. Let me think.
It's not a bad question, Bert. In that movie, they destroyed the brain to kill him. Is that what they did? The brains, right.
Brains! The brain! I hit the brain! Oh! Get it off! 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 Get it off!
The military is nervous.
How was your day?
Usual crap.
The police are confused.
Send more cops.
It worked in the movie! Well, it ain't working now. Brain the movie line!
It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert.
The return of the living dead.
Okay. Well, we don't have a whole lot of new business today, so let's talk about the upcoming Houston Horror Film Festival coming out.
Yes.
Third weekend
Yes.
of June.
Last week we announced the
Yes.
October show.
Yes.
This week we're announcing the June show.
June.
So don't get things out of line.
So-
June comes first.
The big 3-day Houston Horror Film Festival coming your way the weekend of June 25th.
So that's like 2 months away.
Dude, put your
Yes.
happy pants on.
Still got more guest announcements to come. Not a whole lot, but we got some more. But so far, we're looking at Clint Howard, Tony Moran,
Yup.
Danielle Harris, which
Give it.
really blew
Dude,
it up.
that blew me away when I saw that pop up. Dude, I am one of the co-hosts of this show, and when that announcement hit, it took me completely
I
sideways.
hadn't told you.
Like,
I didn't tell you about
I
that.
was like,
I'm
holy
sorry.
shit. Kenny Harris is awesome, dude.
Scout Taylor Compton,
Yep.
Christina Klebe, Tamara Glenn, Naomi Grossman, who I cannot wait to meet.
My
Naomi
wife's
Grossman,
excited.
American Horror
She's a
Story.
big fan of
Just
Horror Story.
that character of hers. We're set up an interview with her too, by the way. Her character in American Horror Story, which actually will also be in the next season of American Horror Story. She is returning for her 3rd season.
The same character?
Yes.
Okay.
Pepper is coming back. She's going to be there. Oliver Robbins, who we're going to be interviewing here pretty soon, and that will be coming to you. Laura Park Lincoln, of course, from
Yeah, the psychic chick
Yes,
whooping Jason's
Friday the 13th,
ass,
part
bringing
7.
Kate Hodder that fucking pain.
the incredible Bailing, who I cannot wait to meet her. She is going to be a handful. I have no idea who I'm going to have set up as her handler, but it ought to be interesting. Leslie Easterbrook.
Dude, Police Academy. Good. When I was a kid, who did not eyeball her?
Jumpstart
and
in
fucking
your
Jesus,
puberty, brother.
Jesus Christ.
Dude, of course, Bricky Stevens, Rob Mello, and Laureen Landon so far.
Nice.
Are our guests.
Nice.
And I love how you in that so subtly with "so far."
So
Dude,
far.
that's like that, dude. We've been on board with this for a while. You know, Tony and Troy with the Houston Horror Film Festival were gracious enough to let us interview them, and then later on
Join
forces with them. They have just have their finger on the pulse of everything cool in horror, and
Dude.
they just keep dropping names like it's like oh, we're gonna bring this person. It's like, my God, guys. Like it usually takes you a while to build some stuff.
Dude,
like,
they've been on a fucking tear.
they've been on a tear.
Well, what's awesome is, talking to Tony recently, we're talking about how great it is that we've met each other and we've been working together. And the main reason is we both have the same goal, is to increase the Houston horror community, bring everybody together, and just celebrate everything that we love together.
Dude, and I've said it before, 3 pop-ups, that I've always wondered why Houston couldn't get more love. For convention scenes, especially horror. I mean, I love Frightmare. I drive to Dallas. We do the whole shtick. We stay and all that jazz. But I've won. It's like, this is like the 4th largest city in the United States. There's no way we can't have this here. Why has this not happened? I've seen people try it and just fail.
Right.
And that it's able to occur, I'm just so incredibly grateful. Just to be around it, just to be a part of it is amazing.
I think, and we are recording, so this is public record. This is my opinion, because when we started Scary Dads, I looked into where is the Houston horror at, and Houston has a lot of issues. Like, let's say
some of the worst.
Well, Houston has a lot of fair weather fans, but that's sports. Let's not get that.
Right.
Houston has issues like very, very hot summers. It's so broad that people would almost rather drive to Dallas than to downtown.
Right.
Like it really does. But the reality is, most of the people who attempted to start a convention were after money.
Right.
They did it for the wrong reason.
That was
exactly.
the plan.
Right.
Was if we bring these people, we will make money. And I'm not saying that we're not in. Like, this is a business. We're trying to make some money, but the money is built to build the business and make it to where we can bring a bigger event and make it better.
Right.
And starting a little bit small, growing, getting some equity, making people understand and trust us, making our vendors trust us, because Houston does have a reputation for not following through with them.
And that's been one of the major deals I could have seen going into that. Is there have been history with certain people putting together certain conventions and then having issues with not paying talent, breaking contracts, and that's going to sour the pool. I mean, you're going to have agents talk to each other, and they're going to say, "Hey, these guys in Houston, man, they're not paying," and it's going to cause a lot of issues. But it's been done correctly. It's the Marvel way of doing it. He did Captain America. He did Thor. He did whatever. Now we get the Avengers.
Well, what's great is we're at this point now where people are reaching out to us saying, "When are you guys doing another event?"
They see the equity in the event.
If we wanted to, we could have had 40 guests for this June event.
And we just really want to make every event, especially with like COVID restrictions and people being worried, and like, look, there's all of these logistics on the backside of things that we have to worry about. But we're worrying about them and we're taking them seriously instead of putting them on you to have to worry about. Like, the governor dropped COVID restrictions. We kept them.
Right.
People were concerned. We're trying to do the right thing, and you may agree with restrictions or don't, but we're trying to do the right thing by our guests, our vendors, and everything. We're not just in it for the money. If we make a little scratch on the side, that would be great. We're in it for a party. And I think we're about to have a couple of amazing ones.
Well, me and Tony visited the hotel last week, and we're going to have we're currently judging the movies for the film festival. Some of the best movies. It's amazing the quality of film submissions that we had this year. It's like everybody took their stimulus checks last year and decided to invest in movies. And we're going to have screenings the entire time that we're there. Troy's going to be handling all the movie screenings. We have parties and after-hours events for you to take part in. We have a whole bunch of people that are going to be staying at the hotel. So we're going to have stuff for everyone to do. We've got almost 60 vendors we're going to have there.
All right, there's going to be
photo
ops.
Professional photo ops this time. It's going to be a really, really
some
good time.
costume photo ops. There's going to be a beast.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait, dude.
And I'm in love with the whole thing. I'm in love with the whole thing, just getting people what they want. It's not just about, like you guys said, it's not just about cash. Any idiot can make money. It's can you have fun while you do it? Can you entertain the audience?
And that's why we're here. And we thought with 2019, 2020, everything that hit us, maybe we would have been done. But it looks like we're only just getting started. That was kicking over the motorcycle engine. Boom! Here we go. So anyway, let's take a break and let's come back and let's talk about some scary movies.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Jeff?
The day you count on for terror is not over. Friday the 13th, Part 2, rated R.
Starts Friday at the Sacramento Drive-In.
All right, so last week we talked about gateway horror. We talked about that stuff that was not really meant to be horrific, or maybe wasn't thoroughly. It certainly wasn't billed as a horror movie. That wasn't its purpose or its point, but it had those elements that made you look deeper into what might else be out there. Then one day you're walking through the living room and your parents are watching a movie, and some dude gets caught in a rope snare, and a dude with a hooked machete cuts his throat. and you go, I should not have just seen that. And that was my introduction to Friday the 13th Part 2 when I was about 6, 7 years old. My parents were watching it, and
Dude, that's how it happens.
That's how it happened. And that traumatized me. I was scared as shit. I was walking around all the time looking for rope traps. Because I don't want to.
Well, I think, the last episode we talked about being desensitized to a certain extent to some of the things we see in horror. And I could say that the two movies that stand out the most that I shouldn't have seen when I saw them was the first one I've talked about on the podcast before was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
The original, I remember vividly when I originally saw it, rented it, because the way it worked out, me and my cousin would ride our bikes to the video store. We had carte blanche, according to my mom, to rent whatever we wanted for the weekend, and we rented Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the weekend. And I remember I'm born August 1973. The movie took place in August 1973, so as soon as I saw that at the very beginning, I was into it. Watched it way too young. And then the next thing me and my cousin rented, I'll never forget, the night we rented it, was Faces of Death. I really, really, really should not have watched Faces of Death when I did.
The question, though, is did you regret watching it then? And when I mean, like, did it scare you so bad that you're like, man, I really...
No,
like,
it didn't. That's the problem. It made me want to see more. It's like we talked about that adrenaline rush with horror. I wanted to see more. I was fascinated. I want to see these things actually happen. I want to learn more about it and everything. And that's one of the reasons why, the scariest horror I find, we were talking about, people saying, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen? Right. Movies where shit can actually happen. I can separate, reality from fantasy pretty easily. I know Freddy isn't going to come get me in my nightmares. But when I watch a movie like The Strangers, and there's some people out in the middle of nowhere and they can't leave because there's actual people outside keeping them in there, that's a scary movie to me. Mm-hmm. Event Horizon, that shit's not scary. It's a wonderful movie. It has jump scares and stuff like that, but I'm not going to have nightmares from it. Right. I'll have nightmares from a movie like The Strangers. That shit will actually make me have bad dreams because that shit can really happen. One of the scariest movies I ever saw, I'll never forget when I watched it, Kids. Remember Kids?
Oh yeah.
Just the idea,
ends in a rape scene.
The idea of walking through a park and upsetting some kids with skateboards and them beating me unconscious with their skateboards. That shit could really happen. That kind of shit to me was scary.
To this day, I have a little bit of trepidation, and it's only because I know that if some group of 14-year-olds start fucking with me, and if I lay one out, I go to prison. Yeah. So it's like, what do? You push it back, like, please don't make me do anything, but also please don't hurt me.
So with my kids, I've also always raised them to understand the difference between fantasy and reality. But there's some movies tread that fine line where, that could actually happen. And when we get to based on a true story, we'll get to some of that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, so those are the two movies that I saw way too early, and once I got hooked with those two, and they didn't scare me away, I just started renting shit. I started realizing, a lot of these horror movies got boobs. Dude. Yeah. So the Blood Diner, which I've rented 1 million times, there's a scene in there where a topless woman's running around with a hush puppy on her head, and I love that scene because
you really love hush puppies.
When it's boobs, and then her head gets knocked off with a broom. It's two of the greatest. Chopping Mall. There's some hot women in Chopping Mall.
Yeah.
As a kid, I love seeing that, man. And that movie, it's a classic.
One of the ones I saw way too young, and I talk about it all the time, is Return of the Living Dead. I saw that the year it came out on HBO, so I must have been 7 years old. And that is far too young for me. It's hilarious now, but it's such a visceral film. That movie is staunch violence, and when it kicks in, it is violent,
and it's gory.
Oh, it's gory, and there's the subtle undertones to the whole thing. But like you said, there were zombies, there were tits. Trash rips her top off, and she's dancing on the altar.
Yeah, she's not topless.
No, she takes her shit off. She gets. I don't think she's wearing a stocking.
Shout out to Linnea, we love her.
Dude, somebody get some light over here. Trash is taking her clothes off again.
Well, that's one of those things that's just like, like you say, watch it way too young, or you got you because like being a horror podcast host, I've had those moments because I will unashamedly say like horror movies scared me when I was a kid. Like I would watch something and I would be scared of it, and I'd probably call for mom, like, "Oh, I'm scared." But then I had to evaluate because I'm like, okay, one of the first horror movies, one of the first things that really piqued my interest was Jaws 3. That was 1983. I was 8. And I was watching Jaws, wreck shop in the marina at 8 years old, and I loved it.
Piranha, dude. Yeah, I watched that on USA Up All Night.
Well, but Piranha, was one of those that I watched. I mean, I don't remember exactly how I watched it, but in San Marcos, there's a place called Aquarena Springs, and there are natural springs that, flow out of and they dammed it up and made a lake. It's a freshwater lake, and it's really, really deep, and they've got these perch. And the reason they filmed it there is because the water's so clear, and they've got these perch that act like piranha. They kind of cluster together and stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I was, again, 7, 8, 9 years old, and I had seen piranha, and they filmed it there. And, you're looking through a glass-bottom boat, and you see these perch down in the water, and you're like, I'm not going to step anywhere near that glass. I'm not going to get anywhere near the side of the boat. Like, I'm scared. But that didn't, keep me up at night. It didn't scare me. It wasn't...
Right.
Monsters like sharks and fish and bears and alligator and those sorts of things. It was slashers, like you said, the stuff that could actually happen. And I remember being a kid, probably like 10, 11 years old, laying in my bed, terrified of Jason. Terrified. Because there's no stopping that guy. He's just going to get you. Like, if he wants you gone, you're gone. There's no running. The car's not going to start. You can't get away. And I remember laying one night almost hyperventilating because I was so scared because we'd watched Friday the 13th Part 5. A bunch of my friends wanted to rent it. It had just come out. It was 1985. I was 9 years old. We just watched that movie, which, love it or hate it, has some of the gnarliest kills in the whole franchise.
Right.
It's got a lot of boobs in it, too, which are awesome. But the boobs are kind of...
And the dancing. The girl in the room.
Yeah. The boobs are eclipsed by just the sheer, gnarly brutality of the kills. And I remember laying on one night just almost hyperventilating because I was so fucking scared of Jason that I had to tell myself, and this is how I know, when people are, go off weird mental tangents, I almost did a yoga thing. It was like, look, if he comes through the window, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. You're not getting away.
Right.
You just have to let it go. You have to sleep. This is my conscience or my Holy Spirit or something being like, you can't.
It is what it is at this point.
You can't live like this.
If you're going to die,
if this motherfucker's coming after you, it's over. So just lay there until the window breaks because there's nothing else you can do. And that calmed me out, and I think that's kind of what, after that, it became the roller coaster for me. It was like, okay, if I can survive that, if I can survive almost a panic attack and just be like, the world sucks and there's shitty people in it and sometimes they want to stab you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, way too young to be watching movies like that.
Oh yeah.
And but again, it was the 80s. We had all of those what we talked about last week, all of those things that made you interested. So there were certain levels. You're like, whoop, that's too scary. Fucking RoboCop, dude. We talked about that last week. RoboCop. I remember going to school. Everybody's talking about RoboCop. RoboCop's the shit. Did you see RoboCop? RoboCop's awesome. Man, there is a guy who gets melted by toxic waste and then hit by a car and explodes. It's awesome. And I'm being like, holy shit. How do they come up with this stuff?
Dude,
you know what I mean?
Dude, the wonders of Paul Verhoeven. Love that man.
It's brilliant. But again, what is RoboCop?
Oh, it's
87, so I was 12.
It's incredibly violent.
It's ultra violent. So there was so much of that, and then later I realized my entire life was surrounded by horror. Fucking Ronald McDonald Land was horror.
Right.
There was so much scary
another
shit.
one I saw too young was Halloween. The first Halloween was scarier for me than the Friday the 13th movies. I love Friday the 13th. I will take Friday the 13th over Halloween as a franchise any day of the week.
Likewise.
I love it. The one I loved the most was like part 4, part 3.
Part 3 is the one that I'm most endeared to because I was at that age when it was on cable that it played on a loop all the time, and I saw that one more than the other.
And what I loved about 3 and 4 was that they'd have that quick little recap of how Jason got there, so you'd get like a quick montage of kills. But then I watched Halloween. I remember watching Halloween for the first time, and what I love about it now, one of the things many things I think is amazing about Carpenter's work is that it affected where you lived in actuality.
Yeah,
because it wasn't in a camp, it wasn't in some fictional dreamland. It was in your block. It was on your neighborhood. It was like an attack on suburbia.
It was across the street.
Right. It was in your neighborhood. It was that silent stalking. It didn't run with a chainsaw. It didn't, have the giant machete and the hockey mask jogging through the woods. It was just this shape that stood outside of a window for 45 minutes waiting for you to go and make popcorn so it could sneak into the room and hack you up with a butcher knife. Mm-hmm. And it was so good in that it was silent. So when you were walking around your house at night, like you went to go get a drink of water, the rooms were dark, it was really quiet, and you could imagine that. You could imagine that down the hall in that complete pitch black darkness, that there was something standing there watching you. Mm-hmm. You get your water and maybe you look around to see if something was there. There was nothing ever there. But maybe you would. Maybe you'd take that little glance and you'd move a little bit faster when you were heading back to your room. And those kind of things weren't necessarily geared toward young children. You see that young, now you're like, fuck yeah, look at him go. But back then you were like,
Well, Halloween got me because it's the same. Like, you go on your you get a little bit older and you start watching movies and you're like, okay, well, I've seen Halloween. Like, I remember Halloween. That's the one with Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, whatever. She was in Trading Places. It's a. But then I watched Halloween when I was older, and like you say, it's like the I should have been scared of Michael or something like him because I was afraid of Jason coming through the window. Michael was the one that was more apt to do that because he kills the dog. Like he doesn't kill. He just
kills anything that's in his way. Yeah.
Right.
And I remember I was in my early 20s, and it was near Halloween. I went out to my parents' house, and everybody wanted to do something, and we were like watched Halloween. I hadn't seen it in a couple of years. And probably hadn't seen it all the way through in a good long time. And I watched Halloween, and when it was over, I went outside for a cigarette. And I leaned against my parents' my parents' house, and I sat down and I looked across the street, and there's a sodium light right there. And I'm looking across the street. I was like, motherfucker could be in any one of those. Like the inside of any one of those houses across the street could be a pile of bodies.
Right.
Festering, rotting. Some twisted killer.
Oh yeah.
And we wouldn't know. It's just
what
and that drove the horror of Halloween home.
It was the paranoia. One of the things that got me into, like right now I'm very detail oriented, especially with films. I'm always watching the backgrounds. I look for little nods and things and homages. And one of the things you catch in Halloween is Michael Myers is everywhere. He's driving the car in the background. He's standing next to a dumpster. He's on the other side of the street. He's looking at the bush. He's over by your car. He's so prevalent in that movie, and it made you paranoid in the wide open space, which is really difficult to make people paranoid in the open. Mm-hmm. You have like the thing that you have a reason to have that paranoia because you can't leave. You're stuck in this thing with this monster. But in Halloween, you were in a neighborhood. You were in a town. You could go out and leave. You have the freedom to vacate, but you don't know where it is.
He's hiding in plain sight.
That's right. He's in the back seat.
Right. He could be in the back seat. He could be standing for some odd reason in your fucking closet. He's hanging out by the garbage disposal. You don't know where he is.
Right. Yeah, but watched it too young. Like you said, I saw that scene from Friday the 13th. My parents were like, "Go to bed." I mentioned my dad was watching that. It was that anthology show that had the cat and the witch and all of this. And I was like 5 years old. And it was the scariest thing. It's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. It's on YouTube. I watched it again. I'm like, holy shit. It was called Catnip, and it was on an anthology. It was called like Night Bites or something in 1981. So I would have been 5 years old. It It's kind of like Tales from the Dark Side or something. It was a very short-lived show. But it was like little bites.
Right.
And like you said, it was like these things you can see. Like there's this guy, and his next door neighbor's a witch, or this is an old lady with a cat, and the cat's bugging him. So the cat keeps coming in his house, and he warns the lady, like, if the cat keeps coming over here, I'm gonna fuck her up. And he sets a little trap for the cat. If the cat comes through the doggy door, he's gonna blow the cat up, but then it ends up killing the lady. And then the cat just comes and just like terrorizing him, going all out to try to kill the lady or try to kill the cat. The cat runs under the bed. He pokes his head under the bed. It's the lady's head. And she's like, and dude, I'm like 6 years old. And just like, I remember that right now as Jason, Freddy, Hellraiser, all fucking Bruce the Shark. Y'all got nothing on whatever who uncredited old lady was head under the bed in 1981 on that fucking show. Because I saw that way too young. That just like sent my heart up into here. Whoa.
Now, another movie that I saw way too young. When I say this movie, you guys are going to be like, what the fuck were you doing watching that shit when you were too young? But the fact that I saw this movie too young, I can see some positives in this, but Clockwork Orange. I saw Clockwork Orange when I was way too young. I
saw it pretty young, yeah.
But one thing I can say is, watching Clockwork Orange at a young age, it desensitized me. It was wild. It desensitized me to a point to where I could watch. And my mom was always, my dad died when I was 9. My mom was a single mom. She worked a lot, but she, just like I've done with my kids, she made sure that I understood the difference between reality and fantasy. Movies are one thing. That's not how real life works.
But that home invasion.
But one thing about watching Clockwork Orange at a young age, I think it's where I first started developing a appreciation for character development and actual Stanley Kubrick style filmmaking.
Right.
Watching Chopping Mall is one thing. Really appreciating what the message behind Clockwork Orange, and the watching of a character go from one extreme to the next. I think at a young age, it just started. It developed an appreciation for certain movies. I started watching Deer Hunter at too young of an age.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Platoon.
There's so many movies that I watched, but the thing about it is, even as a young child, I could sit there. You would try to show a movie like that to a young child, they get bored and want to stop watching it. I could appreciate what the movie was all about, and actually sit through the whole thing.
All right.
Yeah. So Clockwork Orange definitely. I think seeing that at a younger age, it helped me appreciate movies more. Because you look at movies like Friday the 13th, Michael Myers, they have a certain formula. I've talked on the podcast before about how there's iconic horror characters. That's why my favorite iconic horror characters are like Pinhead and stuff, because it has character development, he has a personality.
Right.
It's stuff you can appreciate. When it comes to most of your slashers, it's a basic formula. Now, some people do it better than others. There's some horrible slashers out there. Then there's the greatest of all time, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. But it just made me just have a different way to look at films and appreciate certain films more than I had before. This other movie's not hard. I think I've talked before. I was 12 years old when my mom dropping me off to see Night Streams in the theater. Shit like that. But it just... I matured quickly. I mean, when I was 9, my dad died, like, in front of me, so I kind of grew up kind of fast. So but it gave me my love of film that I have. But we were saying, when IMDb came out, there was nothing better. I lived
on that. I remember finding out about that, and I was wanting to high-five people. It's like, now I can look stuff up. I can see who did the effects for things. Dude,
I was watching fucking Night Shift the other day with Henry Winkler, and I'm like, that looks like Clint Howard. Like, holy shit, that is Clint Howard.
So much. I do that so fast. Like, who is that guy? Hold on, let me look. Let me see who that is.
No, dude, like, I remember going to the grocery store, and there was Weekly World News and National Enquirer and that stuff, and there was Fangoria. And depending on what was on the cover, because, again, being a little kid, and again, you have a weird sort of way back machine, your 20/20 vision, going into the past, your rose-colored glasses. Dude, I remember going and seeing there was Guitar Magazine, there was this and that, there was Fangoria, and sometimes it was like Dragon Slayer, and other times, or Godzilla or something. Other times it was just and there was other magazines. But I remember being scared to watch the movies. But I'd sit there and my mom was running through the grocery store, and I'd look through Fangoria, and it'd be so and so did the effects on this movie or whatever.
Right.
So and so did the effects on that. So American Werewolf and stuff. So there was also stuff HBO would have because I remember American Werewolf was on HBO. My parents were you cannot watch that, and I wanted to watch it, but I was also kind of I trust you if you're telling me, because I've seen some shit and I don't like it. I'm scared. But I'd sit there and read about how they made the effects. Then HBO did this thing. It's how they,
right.
They didn't show how it was done. They were just talking about how awesome it was and how it was a promo for the movie.
I remember those.
And that's why watching the movie always trips me out, because in the little 30-minute special, they were playing Bad Moon over the transformation scene.
Okay.
Whereas in the movie, it's Blue Moon while he's transforming. And it's a Landis effect where he does, he plays Bad Moon, and all... can't remember his name. The guy who turns into the werewolf.
Naughton.
But his name, David.
Yeah.
David does is pace around his apartment. Lights on, he's walking around, Bad Moon plays, 2.5 minutes long. And you expect something to happen, and it doesn't. And then it goes to Blue Moon, and then he starts twitching. In the promo for this American Werewolf thing, they were clipping the scenes where his hands were stretching,
right.
His fangs were growing, and they were playing Bad Moon, the Creedence song. So in my mind, when I watch the movie, when I hear the Creedence, I'm ready for the transformation, and it always kind of drops out because I'm like,
what happened?
What happened? And then Blue Moon starts, and he starts twitching. I'm like, oh shit! But that's the power of watching that promo, that little trailer thing. But I remember watching that. I mean, to be fair, when you watch American Werewolf, a lot of the kills are implied, they're cut scenes.
Right.
The hardest, the scariest parts are him talking to Jack and transforming. But in this trailer thing, it was mostly Jack and transforming. It was all of the makeup effects condensed. So I more or less seen the movie in this trailer. So when I actually saw the movie, it scared the shit out of me. But I'd already seen the good parts, But I remember seeing that and just being like, oh man, because I was still so young, I couldn't separate reality from fantasy, and I'm just like, that would hurt so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Your
bones, you can hear him breaking and stuff.
Yeah, that would, he's obviously not having a good time.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing.
And so I remember that was such a visceral, and the comedy music and all the John Landis Animal House sight gags and bullshit that he throws in there, and then
the dream sequence.
You're just he sets it, and then he spikes it, and then the ball grows fucking razor blades as it's coming at you, because it's just that brutal in American Werewolf.
That's what happened with me with Poltergeist, which I saw way too young. I think
I think we all did.
I think that's where we're gonna land.
What really makes Poltergeist, it's an absolutely terrifying film, is its pacing. It just starts off completely accessible as the family unit and the little fun with the specter, phantasm, poltergeist thing, whatever. And then it goes into them setting the scene with the television, which was very prevalent at the time. Nowadays, you don't have to worry about the fuzzy screen, television stations going off the air, and using that sound and their subtle use of music and lighting to make the house the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And it digs in, and it digs in hard. They bring in the investigators. You get the clawing at the face. You get the really terrible stuff. And then it ends. They get the girl back. They go to the bathtub.
You
They're
think
going to
it's a
wash
happy ending?
off. Everybody's hunky-dory. And you're like, wow, that's really good. You didn't realize there were 40 minutes left in this movie, and all he did was set you up. Now we're going to get real. Now it's going to get real live, real fast. They set up the bit with the clown on the bed. You know, before it was just a clown. He throws the jacket over it and stuff, and you're like, all right, nothing has happened with that clown. You forget that it's even an issue. And then once that scene starts with Robbie getting drugged into that, scared the fuck out of me.
You know,
the look on the face was so amazing. The sound effects.
But that's one of the amazing things about Poltergeist. I think that hit hard for most of us when we watched it at that age. Was it featured a little boy the same age as us?
Yeah.
And Oliver did such an amazing job showing fucking terror. I mean, it was so realistic, the fear that he had.
Dude, the voice when he's all, Carol Ann!
As a
Carol
kid,
Ann!
we could all relate to where he was because we could see ourselves in, because we were that kid.
Mm-hmm.
We could see ourselves in that exact situation.
We were exactly the same age.
Yeah.
And I said, it was funny because we were talking about, rating movies. It's like PG or whatever. I remember because my grandparents, in the house I grew up in, it was about a mile from here, on the other side of the freeway. And my grandparents had the house built in the 40s or early 50s. My parents grew up there, and then I was born and lived in a house over in Spring Branch, and then we'd go to Grandma's house. My parents would leave for the weekend and drop me off at Grandma's house. And at my grandparents' house, it was one of those situations where it was like the 40s. It was the 50s, so they had like the formal living room and then the parlor. So you had the former living room where they had their nice furniture and the painting and like the record player, and like it was, if you were going to go to a website for mid-century advertising, like it was decked out. My grandparents were my grandfather worked for Cameron Iron Works in World War II. He didn't go to war because they wouldn't let him, because he was a foreman at an iron factory. So he was wealthy and home. So he had a lot of money to put into a suburban house. And where we are right now recording this podcast was pasture. They lived off in the boondocks in a big house in a what would eventually become a suburban neighborhood. And they had all of the niceties of 1950s pop culture. And then we lived in Corpus, seaside town, so that's why Jaws was so prevalent for me. Well, my parents would go on vacation or whatever, and they'd drop me off at my grandparents' house for the weekend. And I don't think my sister was around. Poltergeist came out. Yeah, she would have been a baby. So nobody paid attention to me because my sister was a little kid. So they're like, "Oh, carry this and carry that," and they were just like, "Do what you want to do." And I had a cousin that would come and play with me because otherwise I'd mess shit up. So they'd bring my cousin over, and like he'd stay for the weekend too, and he and I would run around and like make bows and arrows out of sticks and like get into fights and whatever. But I remember he and I had a conversation because he's like, my parents won't let me watch rated R movies. I was like, mine too. They're fucking like 10 years old.
Right.
My parents won't let me watch the rated R movies. Like, it's like, but we can watch Poltergeist. It's like, PG, yeah. We could probably watch that one because we won't get in trouble for that. And so what we do is my grandparents would go to bed at like 8. They'd watch like Wheel of Fortune and whatever that first sitcom was.
And that was it.
And then they just go to bed. And we had the whole rest of the house. There was a TV with a VCR, cable, no remote control. The cable company gave us a remote control. It worked like a little Nintendo. It had a wire coming from the console that we could control and go to cable and like dial up Poltergeist. And we sat there and watched that movie, and PG. There you go. It's fine for kids.
Dude, that movie was just vicious.
Dude, the clown scene, like all of the scenes. It's funny is you like try to pick apart Poltergeist, and you go, oh, that one. And at the end of the day, you've narrated the entire movie.
Right.
Dude,
right.
The entire flooded pool scene
Dude, the pool,
with the
the
bodies
tree,
coming out.
all of it, dude.
It's just and there's one scene that to this day I'll jump every once in a while when I see it because I watched Poltergeist. I love that movie, but at the very beginning, they're in the kitchen. Carol Ann's sitting on the counter. She's filming Carol Ann. The camera pans this way. When it goes back, all the chairs on top of the table. That scene, I jump all the time from that. For whatever reason, just it's done so well, quick, and the timing is so good. Because Carol Ann's in the shop the whole damn time.
Right. Yeah.
It just barely comes away, and when it goes back, all these chairs on top of the table. It's like, how did that happen?
When they've got her in a little football helmet,
and she slides across the floor.
Yeah. But that's a new build. It's a new build in 1980s splendor, and the dad, Greg T. Nelson, he was part of the real estate project. So this is like the house. I was like, he's got the prime real estate, and it's brand new. They haven't even fully moved in yet. There's no pictures on the walls. There's still boxes. Like, everything's still just so fresh and clean. And that's the thing that's scary about it is, like, you're talking about Michael Myers attacks.
This was in your neighborhood,
in your neighborhood. This attacks, like, no, this isn't a Scooby-Doo, like, haunted mansion that you're moving into, like Hill House or something, where you're like, well, that guy killed himself over there, so let's just, like, avoid the cold spot. Like, we're aware that there's shit. There's no shit. Everything still smells like fresh paint and lumber.
Right.
And this is going on in their house, and they're like, well, what is, okay, it's bizarre. Maybe the floor's a little angled, so she slides or whatever. Which that's one of the first signs. Like Joe Beth Williams, like, put a football helmet on my kid because we just set her on a level floor and she slides across the room.
I think one of the things that made it scary, really scary for me as a kid watching it, and that kind of sinks in, is if you pay attention to that movie, the kids are alone. I mean, there's people in the house. They never know where their fucking kids are. Mm-hmm. Like Robbie, he's alone. He's on his goddamn own. Carol Ann, she's alone. She's on her. They have parents. They go in the room. They get fucking high. They go to sleep. And all these kids are left to suffer all this shit in the house. And that made it for me very troubling. Like, my mom worked nights. She was a single mom until she met her second husband. So a lot of the time, we were latchkey kids.
Yeah.
You took yourself to school, you walked yourself home, you made yourself dinner.
Right.
When you go to sleep, my mom wouldn't be there half the time. And only on weekends. And on weekends you were outside. But watching, like Poltergeist, these kids are alone. And who's going to save him from this clown? Mm-hmm. Carol Ann disappears into a TV whenever...
Well, she disappears in the closet.
There's the closet, and then they go outside, and they're worried about Joe Beth in the pool. And then after she pulls out there off the deck, it's like, then they hear the kids screaming. Suddenly, it's like, oh, fuck, we forgot we had children. We need to go and see what's wrong, but we're going to run after Carol Ann. And while Robbie's in his room, being choked to death by a fucking clown. And it's like these kids are really, it's like it hammers home that point, is you're on your own.
Mm-hmm. You're not always going to have them there to protect you.
Right. And there wasn't any quick coming to the rescue dad to beat off the bad guy and pull you to safety.
You said beat off the bad guy.
Beat off the bad guy. You let him stay, or you're going to beat him off.
but yeah, dude, like... And that's like, oh, Stephen King and the Clown, like, it got everybody. Like, that was a whole generation of children traumatized by Stephen. Dude, when it came out, I mean, I could have read the book. Well, it came out much later, but I started reading Stephen King when I was like 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah, I was pretty young.
Poltergeist had hit me whenever I was like 8.
Yeah.
Right.
And...
That's a creepy-ass clown.
Dude. The whole, like, the Toy Story concept, it's like all of that. Like, I remember being a little kid and, like, I had a He-Man guys, and I had them, like, you're playing with your guys, and then your mom says go to bed, so all of your guys are just there. And I remember laying there, moonlight's coming through the window, and I'm like, I bet you whenever I go to sleep, they all just continue on playing. Like, we've all had that. That's why Toy Story hit the way that it did. Right. But with Poltergeist, he's like, I'm scared of, like, I've got a toy in my room that I'm not afraid of. It's not a thing. I'm not afraid of it until right now.
Suddenly I'm afraid of it.
Right now I'm afraid of it. And then all of a sudden, like, it wraps around his neck and tries to choke him. Like, nobody liked clowns after that. That was right there. Yeah, that is the hammer in the coffin for clowns. Because clowns used to be comic relief. It's like, why are you scared of Jerry Seinfeld? Jerry Seinfeld's funny. He tells jokes. He
Right.
says, you know, what about mustard? Until Jerry Seinfeld just like shows up at your house and tries to put a knife in your throat, and then you're like, I don't like that motherfucker anymore.
Now Jerry Seinfeld and I don't get along. Thanks, Jerry.
You know what I mean? It's like everybody just thought clowns were just dandy until Poltergeist, and then Carol Ann gets pulled into the wall.
Dude, the whole TV.
And Craig T. Nelson has played
crazy.
nothing but comedic characters his entire career. He did Coach. He's on like Young Sheldon now. He's a funny guy, but you don't look at him and he's
Longest Yard, he was kind of an asshole.
Well, no, he's good at being an asshole, but he's not a very versatile actor. He's just kind of him.
Yeah.
And him is the dad from Poltergeist. That's who he is.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you know, which one of you disciplines the children more? And she's like, probably him. He's like, that's not fair. She's like, yell at him. He's like, Caroline, get your ass down here. And she's like, Rawr! She appears in the void. Like, that is so real because that's a parenting thing.
Right.
It's like, who's the more disciplinarian? It's like, doesn't make you necessarily the bad guy. It's just who they're going to listen to, who they're going to respond to. Oh, it's you? Yell. Ah. It's got so much nuance and so many details, and then
Scared the shit out of me.
Dude, as a kid, it scared the crap out of me.
when they finally fucking crush it, then they go to the hotel and
the TV wheels out,
like,
and you hear the la la la.
that's some music too. Is that's another one of those ones that just doesn't let you down because the music's not scary. It's kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like kind of sing-songy, like do-do-do-do-do. But then whenever it's in context, you're like, that's a messed up lullaby right there.
Dude, I had issues with TVs for a while after that. Like whenever the station went off, dude, that static, because you just hear that, and you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't
You go
don't
back
know.
to that, what you remember, yeah.
Right, it's like, dude, I mean, now I'm good, I'm fine and all that, but when I was a kid and that happened, I saw that too young. I wasn't ready for how smart that movie was, how well it was going to play you. Because you get older and you can see horror coming 1,000 yards. I can watch a movie and I can almost tell you what's going to happen beat for beat, having never seen it. Because you know
It's on their formula.
Right. You can see how they're framing the shot. You can hear the change in the music. You can tell, during the timing, I can look at the timing of a film and see when the first act ends, they're going to do whatever in the second act. Poltergeist was really smart, and it knew how to scare you. It isolated you inside of your own home. It hit you with the scary things inside your own house that were readily prevalent. It was just...
Then it brought you in the little midget lady with the Lisa Simpson voice.
Yeah, who couldn't...
like,
yeah,
she's scary. She's scary. She's the good.
Yeah.
She's creepy as hell.
But she's creepy.
And she just ruined it for midgets. She wasn't even a full-on midget. But ever since her, I'm like, maybe she can help get this...
It just so you know, that was another thing. I'm watching Somewhere Over the Rainbow with Chevy Chase. Remember that?
Yeah.
And Carrie Fisher, and I saw her in Somewhere Over the. So I'm on IMDb. I'm like, it has to be her. It has to be her. Sure enough, it was the same.
Hell yeah!
I love her in that Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
Yeah,
she was as a librarian, so great.
Yeah, dude, the good guy is scary too. They're like, oh, one time we were on this investigation, and this little toy car moved like an inch in 12 hours.
It's so funny. He's like,
let me show you
they
something.
open the door, and the fucking Incredible Hulk's riding the shark.
I love how Craig T.
Like
Nelson
a
just
rodeo.
looks at it and goes, and he opens the door and walks off. We don't really go in there.
And so many scenes in the movie when the steak starts
crawling across the counter,
No,
and then
it
it does
starts
the thing.
like
With maggots.
Yeah, with maggots coming out and everything.
Well,
the guy peels his face off.
peeling scenes because he's just like,
That movie will scare. As a kid, if you hadn't watched a lot of horror, if you didn't have a lot of exposure, and you saw Poltergeist, probably as an adult, if you had no real exposure to scary movies, you can keep The Conjuring for your first ghost movie that scares you, and I will trump you a Poltergeist all day long because that movie fucks with you.
yeah, Poltergeist is, and then you got like the Bernie Wrightson demon just popping out for a minute.
Hair and everything, yeah.
Like,
bites Craig T. Nelson, or bites the other guy. I got him on the side. Like, yeah, we don't go upstairs.
Oh yeah, all in his
yeah. He's like, we don't go upstairs. we sleep down here in the living room. Yeah, and you get older, and there's still aspects of that are unsettling. It's like the family is like they can't leave because their kid's missing, but they can't go upstairs. So they all just kind of congregate in the living room, and they're so in touch with all the horror around them. Like, oh, don't worry, there'll be another flash in around 30 seconds.
Yeah, they're just so used to it.
they're like desensitized. Like, yeah, there's a giant demon that guards the steps. We don't go there. It drops watches every now and again from the weird fuzzy shit in the sky.
Well, like when he's yelling at his boss, he's like, "You did this on purpose. Like you moved. You
never moved the bodies.
Yeah, you never moved the bodies."
But then later you realize it's not about the bodies even. It's just like whatever it is. It's just they were just unlucky. They could have moved 3 doors down. It would have been just as fucked up. But when she falls in the pool and like all the skeletons are popping out,
like dead bodies and everything. Yeah,
vicious. And then you learn later on that they were real skeletons.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And you thought it was like some kind of weird myth, like those stories people tell. You know, the real life. Oh no, it was blah blah blah. And then you read about it, you got like, holy fuck, they really were skeletons. It was just cheaper to import skeletons from India than it was to make fake ones in Hollywood.
They have the better teeth. They're all living dead.
Where did they find all these skeletons with perfect teeth?
So I've mentioned this on the podcast before, and we're pretty much close to the end. But you talk about importing skeletons from India. So one of my customers, a lot of my customers are from India or Pakistan or that area of the world. And I was talking to one of them one time. And I don't remember exactly how we got on the subject, but he was like, "Yeah, he's like." I was like, "Oh, how are things?" He's like, "Things are weird over there." I'm like, "Why are they weird?" He's like, "American diet." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "People are getting fat, they're dying younger, just that's." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "So over where I'm from, we have a graveyard or a cemetery, however you say it, He's like, and it's the way that it works. It's different because we're Hindu, so like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So essentially, when you die, they dig a hole, like a vertical hole, and they drop you in, and then cover you in dirt. And they don't really put a memorial on it, but you've also got this plot of land. So they start thinking about like a battleship grid. Mm-hmm. They start at A1, and they drop you in. And then they just keep going through the grid over the years. And 20, 30 years later, they hit, Z20. And then they start back at A1. And when they dig up A1, there's nothing left. Completely composted. Maybe some teeth, maybe some bones, but for the most part, gone. Well, in the last 20 years, they start hitting back at A1, and they've got mummies. They've got, because of all the preservatives now. Mm-hmm. So they're digging into what should be basically just, really rich soil and finding dead people that have been just sitting in the ground for 20 years as opposed to...
Right.
He's like, yeah, it's kind of a problem because there's not a whole lot of easy empty space there. So they're trying to now we've got crematoriums because before we didn't. We just
right,
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, drop them in A1, and then by the time you get to Z, you just start here, and so it's you just burial ground. You've got thousands of people, but now instead of moist ground, you've got thousands of people.
You got a body farm.
And they're like, we don't know what to do with it. Just stop eating McDonald's, I guess. Yeah, dude. That is the weirdest thing. I think we've probably hit the end of this. Poltergeist, to me, I watched it too young.
I did, easily.
I wasn't Chainsaw Massacre. I think if I watched it now, it'd still be too young, because Poltergeist is fucking brutal. That was a Tobe Hooper joint. That Steven Spielberg came in and
put his name on it.
No, Steven Spielberg directed it more or less and put Tobe Hooper's name on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you not heard that controversy?
Okay, so that's something I would say. I've read multiple accounts in several different ways, especially when it comes to them not being able to re-release it. That's why it's never going to see Blu-ray. It's never going to see an updated, cleaned up, boutique release. There have been interviews with people that said Spielberg was almost never on set, and if he was producer. Hooper directed. And then there will be people that say Hooper only did X amount of work, Spielberg cleaned it up. There's no super definitive, there's no real footage of it. All that stuff is hiding somewhere. There's like nobody can agree on who did what. Until then, I will say it is a Hooper film with Spielberg influence. Because I don't think Spielberg is capable of the amount of fear that Hooper was able to bring.
Spielberg made Jaws.
He made Jaws. That's very true. But Jaws and Poltergeist are two completely different monsters.
Yeah, they are.
It's for me. It's that full atmospheric horror. The gore involved in it. Just the depressing anxiety. Spielberg can make great movies.
We're gonna ask Oliver next week.
Dude, you don't think that's on my list of questions? I'm sure he's been asked that like 1,000 times. I wonder if people are allowed to even talk about it.
I challenge you, though. I challenge you because we'll talk about it at the end. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. So we're going to continue this conversation off air. Join us next week when we talk again about scary things. We love you. Please come to our shows. Please listen to our podcasts.
Please watch horror movies.
Yeah, watch
all the horror movies. Every goddamn horror movie. Watch them all, good, bad, or indifferent. Just enjoy them.
Keep it scary.
Later.
Have fun.